Well, I didn't know I had that much influence. Haha, only joking. Hi everyone, it's Az here from HeelvsBabyface. It's been described as a bloodbath at DC Comics, and who could have seen it coming? Well, apparently everyone, to be honest with you. Whereas the actual repercussions of that was open for debate. But if you've been talking about comics sometime within the last 3 years or so, then you were pretty much of the opinion that something would eventually have to give within the mainstream comic book industry. Why? Because it'd become so partisan, it becomes so anti-consumer, and it was likely out of the big two, Marvel and DC, that it was going to be DC, because Marvel was seemingly more protected by Disney, whereas DC were part of the buyout of AT&T, a company which itself was actually massively in debt. And so if you weren't performing, if you weren't pushing your weight, then you were only going to be part of the culling. Now, even things like The Motley Fool here back in March, they're even talking about this back in March. Is AT&T getting ready to kill DC Comics? This isn't something that just happened on Twitter between Comicsgate and some comic book creators. Now, it doesn't help that DC Comics was becoming an embarrassment. When your industry has to do something like this, your major talent comes out and takes part in this Men in Comics Say No pledge, where they pledge not to grape their own members of staff, then you know that it's probably an industry worth leaving alone. When your own professionals like Tom King target and try and cancel their own peers, they're spending way too much time on social media acting like absolute morons instead of actually focusing on what they should be focusing on, which is their craft. Now let's just look at some of the absolute culling that we have had here. According to multiple published reports, Editor-in-Chief Bob Harras, Executive Editor Mark Doyle, Vice President of Global Publishing Initiatives Bobby Chase, and Senior Story Editor Brian Cunningham were amongst those who lost their jobs. Doyle oversaw the successful rollout of DC's Black Label Publishing initiative, and Chase headed up DC's extremely successful YA graphic novel line. Now, we don't actually have any sales figures to back this up at the moment. However, I am of the opinion that they are probably correct, that it has been extremely successful, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But these weren't the only casualties of this. There were much more. Now, let's just have a look at this, shall we? Now, this didn't have any effect on the decision that AT&T made, but this to me is symbolic. This symbolizes the direction that DC want to go in. It also symbolized how little respect they have, not just for their characters, but for their audience as well. This is an industry that seems to be in constant combat with its own customers, which is absolutely mind-blowing. For the last 10 or so years, there has been a war raging on Twitter, with creators calling their customers ists, isms, phobes, Nazis. Why? Well, they fear that they don't have anything to... there are no repercussions to their actions. We hear them time and time saying, we answer to our editor, we don't answer to you, which is bollocks. We answer to the comic shops, we don't answer to you, which is bollocks. Because ultimately, it's the customer that publishes the comic. It doesn't matter if they publish it, they purchase it from a comic shop or directly from Dan Slott's asshole. That's where they purchase. They will purchase at one form or another, and it comes back to you. So if you are berating the customer, if you are calling your customers everything under the sun, your customer stops purchasing your product made by you. And then, not only that, of course, we had the new wave of talent enter the industry. Talent. You know, so sorry we took over the industry. And what were these people? Activists. Far-leaning, partisan activists. And they were here to tell you what you should be reading, what you should have in your collections. Not listening, telling you. Also, they were bringing in untalented checkboxes. And that's the nicest way to put it. Because if you were to go by the meritocracy, if you were to go by the law of fairness, then it wouldn't matter who you hired. And when people were being criticised for their work, they were using the shield of diversity to hide behind. Because they thought that would protect them. Oh, you're attacking us. You are a ism, and phobe. We're hearing this again. Whereas if you're coming into any sort of industry where you're selling a product, you are open to just as much criticism as anybody else. Why would you be any different? We live in an age of equality. Is that not correct? So you should be judged by the rules of everyone. You can't have it both ways. You can't claim that you want equality and then claim superiority, or claim that you are being targeted. It doesn't make a lick of sense. And these people would also get into their whisper networks, target people, target creators, get involved in war of words, and in the meantime put out tat product. Because to them, the comics, they were incidental. This was a stepping stone onto other things, and the actual customer was worthless to them. These things were always going to lead to repercussions. But we get this indicative of where the industry's going, this utter shite. But this isn't what I brought this up for. It's this person here, Andy Curry. Robin, I'm a DC editor. Robin being the artist of the piece. And I love your work. The reaction to the Wonder Woman cover on Twitter was provoked by a small group of trolls and is not representative of the larger, sophisticated, and enthusiastic readership I've come to know. Well, Wonder Woman doesn't sell particularly well, so that's a lot of bollocks anyway. But first and foremost, it's another example of somebody who at the time, at least thought they were, employed by DC, spoiler alert, not anymore, who thought they're employed by DC, who were taking the artistic diversity shite and protecting that as opposed to the word of the customer. And this wasn't a small amount. The last time that I checked in on this tweet, it was ratioed about 2/3 to 1/3. Everybody, virtually everybody, I use the hyperbolic everybody, was looking at this and seeing it as an utter piece of trash. But I brought up Andy Curry because he's synonymous with destroying Vertigo comics. When I started off collecting comics back in the early 90s, it'd been a couple of years of collecting, and then you suddenly started to hear about the DC Vertigo line. Now, I heard about it initially because when I decided to eventually try and diversify my own portfolio of comics, I asked the person who I used to buy my comics from recommendations. I was given the Longbow Hunters, Mike Grell's Green Arrow 4-part miniseries, or 3-part miniseries actually. And it was suggested for more mature readers. And I read it and I loved it. I loved the more mature themes. I loved the character of Oliver Queen. And that made me pick up Mike Grell's ongoing Green Arrow comic, which again was for suggested for more mature readers. And again, I just fell in love with it. But DC Vertigo, well, that was edgelord stuff at the time. That was edgy stuff. You had incredible books. And I just have to say the names like Preacher, Hellblazer, Sandman, Swamp Thing. And people would be going like, oh! Because even today, the reputation of those books have still carried over. Edgy stuff targeted to older teens and people within their 20s and beyond, let's just be honest. But when Mr. Curry decided to relaunch or be part of the relaunch of DC Vertigo, what did he put up? A bunch of partisan, far left-leaning SJW shit. Racist shit in some cases. Goddess mode. Hex wives. Border town. Oh my god. That gave people like Just Some Guy and others plenty of content to make videos on. And it went down like a lead balloon. Why? Because their imaginary target audience only rewarded them with retweets and likes on Twitter. Not cash dollar. Because their audience was still the same audience that it always had been. Still the same audience that had carried over from decades. And these were the people that they were trying to push out. Gail Simone, remember, with a tweet saying, oh, we can do with getting some of these white guys out. Well, I'm sorry, woman, but these white guys were paying your fucking wages. And these people were buying comics, as they had been for decades before you fridged things up. That's what we got. Now let's have a look at some comic book sales, and we'll see a very interesting swing within the marketplace. These are from 2016. I remember 2016, I think something happened. There was a vote, an election, something like that. But the comic book industry was steady away, as you can see here. But look at where the channels are by the format. Comic book stores, $570 million. Book channels, they're your bookstores, etc. 405 million, 90 million in digital sales, and newsstand and subscriptions, 20 million. The next year, 2017, the year after the year before, and all that sort of thing, suddenly comic book stores are down 55 million. Book channels, they're not shifting. 5 million swing downwards, 400 million. Digital, not moving. Newsstand and subscriptions down 50% to 10 million. Then 2018 comes along. Oh, we see a big bump. Comic book stores around the same, a slight downturn to 510 million. But look at book channels. Up 65 million. Digital up slightly to 100 million. And now subscriptions suddenly gets tied in with things like crowdfunding. So it gets bumped back up to 20 million. So what happened in 2018? Well, let's have a look at this article here. And let's take this little piece here. The double-digit growth is driven largely by a big jump on the juvenile side, which saw a massive 56.2% increase last year. On the adult side, there was a 7.1% drop in sales for adult graphic novels. Scholastic pushed through with books for kids. This is what started to drive the market forward. Comic book shops not budging anywhere, which brings us on to last year and recently lauded, it's up, the industry's up, it's doing great, it's doing wonderful. All these people talking about the death of mainstream comics, la ha 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 ha. But let's see what's actually happened down below, ladies. Comic book channels. or book channels, I should say, Scholastic bookstores, are now 570 million and ahead of comic book stores. Wait a minute. 405 million, 400 million, 465, 570. Look at that growth. That is growth. That's why I do believe that DC's YA side has been popular. Because if we are truly seeing this level of growth within the Scholastic side, within the bookstore side, they will be picking up those products. Those are the products which they will be picking up. But comic book stores up slightly, 5% to 525 million. And if you look at it, 570 million, 515, 510, now secondary at 525. Comic book stores not doing anything. And what is a big problem for comic book stores? They have non-returnable product. So we don't know how much of this is rotting on their shelves. But you see the huge growth in this Scholastic and other bookstores, and that growth signifies sales, because you wouldn't have that growth if they weren't selling. So one side's being supported by sales, this side's not. Digital, not going anywhere, back down to 90 million. Other channels up 5 million, 25%, and that is due to crowdfunding. People shifting over there. But people don't want digital. They want physical product. They want to hold the book in their hand. They want to experience it. And more importantly, you can't censor it. You can't censor physical product. We've already seen censoring going on in comics. We've seen it with Marvel, taking away Wolverine's stogies. We've seen cleavages being tidied up. And even in DC's Black Label for mature readers, we saw the bat penis, which there was an outcry for. For some reason, it's just a dick. Guys have them. If you read the actual book, it made sense why he got naked. We just saw a little bit of penis. But that got censored. You can't censor physical product. And more importantly, it's yours to have. What if DC got bought out? What if everything folded? What if everything shut down tomorrow? You could lose everything. People want physical product. This thing which has been happening with DC is a long time coming. This isn't a sad story, because sadness normally comes with a sense of immediacy. Something out and unexpected, out of the ordinary happened. This isn't unexpected and this isn't out of the ordinary. This was a murderer walking up your pathway very, very slowly, and you answered the door and it stabbed you. This isn't sad. They had a brilliant industry. They have unbelievable characters which have stood the test of time for 80 plus years, and they fucked it up. And they fucked it up with their selfishness, with their pig-headedness, with their ego and vanity. Instead of running DC like a business, they ran it like a fucking high school full of petulant children. Well, when a child gets petulant, when a child gets out of line, somebody with authority comes along and spanks them. And that's exactly what AT&T did. They came along and they expelled a bunch of unruly children. I said it in the last video I did about DC, and I'll say it again. You get what you fucking deserve. And that's what DC Comics got. I have no sympathy. I hope you enjoyed the vid. I know it went on for a bit. If you did, do get a thumbs up. And also subscribe to the channel. Follow me on social media and YouTube for live streaming. Links, they're in the description box down below. And I'll be back with some more stuff very soon. You take care. Bye for now.